Space, the final frontier. These are the podcasts of the podcast Enterprise. Its only mission to explore story structures, to analyze our favorite characters and plot lines, to boldly talk about what everyone has seen before. Hello and welcome everyone to Podcast Enterprise. This is where we watch Star Trek the original series episodes and dissect them for story structure, for some things that we like, some things that we don't like, and give a summary as well. My name is Bala Ramadurai, and with me I have my co-host Parvati Ramkumar. Say hello, Parvati.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Podcast Enterprise. I'm very excited to be talking about today's episode.
Okay, we'll find out why you don't like it or why you like it in our. So we can start with, let's start with the name of the episode. I even forgot what it was. Assignment Earth.
Correct, assignment
Oh,
Earth.
okay, Assignment Earth it
10
was.
out of 10.
I think that's the only thing that's getting 10 out of 10 in this in our analysis today. Can we have a summary of this, Parvati?
In today's episode, we find that the Enterprise has gone back in time to the year 1968. They are apparently on a mission for historical research. And 1968 is actually a decade when there's been a lot of political upheavals and potential for nuclear war. So Kirk and the Enterprise crew, they are orbiting Earth. They have used the deflector shields to prevent themselves from being detected, but they are also shaken by a sort of invisible beam that hits them. And this is very confusing for them because Earth does not have the technology to attack or disrupt anything on the Enterprise in 1968, but something is hitting them anyway. And then they find that this is actually a transporter beam hitting the Enterprise from about 1000 light years away, which is apparently technically impossible according to Scotty. Also, a strange man with a cat with a silver collar materializes in the transportation room. Now, this person, he looks human, he talks human, he seems to be too full of himself. He calls himself Seven. He's an agent of some kind. He's all very vague about his affiliation, but he's also very intelligent because he recognizes that the Enterprise is from the future, which somebody from 1968 wouldn't have been able to gauge. He is not surprised by technology about the Enterprise. He is not surprised that he's in the Enterprise. He just says that his transporter beam has been disrupted and he's here now. He talks to his cat Isis quite a bit, and also about visiting an alien planet, and he refuses to elaborate any further. So finally there's a minor skirmish, and he is knocked out, taken to the med bay, where Dr. McCoy examines him and finds that he is human but in perfect health. Now, Kirk is in a bit of a quandary here because he doesn't know if Seven is actually human or an alien appearing as human, and he confuses himself and the viewer with this kind of analysis. But then Seven manages to fight his way out of the Enterprise. He goes back to 1968. He materializes on planet Earth in his very fancy office where he is interacting with some kind of a portal, I think. He interacts with that. There is also a rocket launch that the United States is undertaking at that time. This is part of the arms race. They want to show their prowess. There is a lot of undercurrents about sending hydrogen bombs into space and how this should be stopped so that Earth's peoples do not fight each other and wipe the planet out. Seven is sent by this mysterious alien race to stop that. He interacts with a computer who gives him timelines, shows him a bit of an attitude. He has to stop this rocket launch so that Earth does not wipe itself out. It gets a little confusing. He also finds himself with a very animated secretary who gets on his nerves most of the time. He's continuing to talk with his cat. Kirk and Spock teleport down to Earth. They want to stop Seven from disrupting the timeline. If Seven does something to destroy that rocket launch, it would also affect the future. They have to control whatever Seven is doing to find out who the aliens are. Seven finds that he can and use the portal to go right up to the rocket. He opens a panel on the rocket side. He pulls out some wires. He's disrupting it. He comes back to his office, and then where Kirk and Spock also find him, he uses that fancy computer to derail the rocket, and it's coming down full speed. This is where Kirk and Spock intercept him, and just as the rocket is coming down to obliterate some countries on Earth and everybody is on high alert, Kirk has another crisis of himself. He's suspecting Seven of destroying worlds and he doesn't know who he is, and this is totally the wrong time for all of that. Finally, he just trust Seven. The rocket does not hit any of these countries. It is detonated in space. There is no harm done. The twist at the end is that rocket, according to the past and future timelines, is supposed to fail. That launch is supposed to fail. So eventually, after all that we went through, the past is unaffected and the future is unaffected, and the story ends. Back to you, Bala.
Okay, so we start with the teaser. The teaser is about the backdrop of what they are trying to do. USS Enterprise is on a historical research mission.
Correct.
As Parvati described, they yank a person out of a transmit beam that is originating about 1,000 light years away. Impossible even with 23rd, 24th century technology. They intercept this person they think is alien initially, but later it turns out to be a human being. So that's where the teaser is. It's all about high technology in 1968, which is not supposed to be there. They are the only people that are supposed to have the high technology, but that's not the case. There is something else going on. So the first act is about us getting to know who or what has just beamed aboard. Turns out it is a human being called Gary 7 or codenamed Gary 7. They don't reveal his actual name ever. They just call him Gary 7 or with some other number 145 or 134 or some other numbers. There's so many numbers thrown around, I forgot which one was which one. Gary 7 then tries to free himself and get out of there so that he could back to Earth where he's apparently supposed to do a mission. However, Kirk, in order to make sure that everything is okay, he puts him in the brig. So that's what happens in the entire whole of first act. Of course, Gary 7 does not stick to the brig and escapes. That's how the first act ends, where the cat and Gary 7, both of them, beam back to Earth. In the second act, we see a screenshot of New York City from 1968. So we see, I think, Chrysler Building and Empire State in the backdrop. Seven comes to an apartment there and he's starting to fiddle around with some gadgets and we don't know what's going on. The entire second act is dedicated to us knowing who Gary 7 is and what he's trying to do, and that's why they had an unmanned computer there just to make the exposition of what he's trying to do, who he is, and what he's capable of. In the meantime, Spock and Kirk try to locate where the signal originated or where the transport beam ended up with. Suddenly, it's all guesswork because Scotty says he can pinpoint it only at 1,000-meter accuracy, but eventually ends up saying which door they have to take. So that's what happens. They try to enter the apartment. By the time, of course, Gary 7 is gone. Second act ends with Gary 7 leaving the apartment and Spock and Kirk entering the apartment. Third act starts with, I think the annoying Roberta is already there. Yeah, she's already there.
Yep.
So, yeah, somewhere there. The third act, we see two cops being beamed back and forth. And that's how that whole thing, it's supposed to be a comical sequence. Because the music says so. Otherwise, I didn't even, I missed the joke. There were some light moments. In the meantime, there's a McKinley base with some rockets standing there. And apparently G7, Gary 7 is supposed to stop it, make it malfunction, which is not a good thing, but he does his best. There's plenty of action in third act. There's Scotty trying to locate Gary 7. Roberta doing best what she can do is messing things up, and Spock and Kirk promptly getting captured by the launch director. So a whole bunch of launch sequence and things like that happening in the third act. Fourth act is, oh yeah, third act ends with rocket going into trajectory the nominal way. I guess that's the normal way. So that's how the end of that launch sequence happens. So everything is normal is what we get to know. Quite a cliffhanger, I would say. Once the trajectory is normal, cliffhanger is what's going to happen. Fourth act starts with Gary 7 trying to take control of this missile. Comes to know that she has to stop Gary 7. So she tries her best. However, Scotty reaches out to Kirk and Spock. They are transported from the base to Gary 7's apartment, where now Kirk has to take a decision to, again, a tricky decision to see whether to let Gary 7 do whatever he was doing, or should he take back control and let Spock do his thing. While the clock has been ticking all through. From somewhere in the second act, we've been seeing a backward ticking clock. At the end, uncharacteristically, I mean, not characteristically, Spock says, live long and prosper, but then say, hey, Gary 7 and Roberta, you have a good life, or something like that. With all danger averted, Gary 7 and Roberta look at each other, and that's how the episode ends. All right, so that's the end of the fourth act. What did you think about Gary 7 and his escapades, Parvati?
Unfortunately for this episode, this is one of those episodes that didn't stick. A lot of the time, I couldn't follow what was happening because there were so many things happening, and you'd
Hmm.
find that it jumped from scene to scene. Different characters were
Hmm.
introduced, and then there was this whole rocket launch sequence with the narration, with the announcements, and then you lose track over there. And then you
Hmm.
have Kirk and Spock bumbling about trying to figure out this and that and getting themselves captured. I think the one thing that did stick out was the cat. But just
I loved that cat. It's
yes.
very, very cute. It showed up at the right place. I
Yes, she
just
did.
loved it.
It's such an adorable, cute little cat. I think
Hmm.
she was a highlight of this whole thing. I
Yes, absolutely. That I should give it to this episode for
yeah.
creating a cat right in the middle of all of the sci-fi action. You need a cat to cool things
Okay.
down.
And I also felt a mild sense of irritation at this whole invisible alien race living so many thousands of light years away, being so benevolent, abducting humans in their kindness, and then sending them back to Earth so that humankind does not destroy itself. Don't they have anything better to do? It's just so confusing and mildly annoying, and it also gives me slightly cult vibes with that because
Hmm.
of the way agents behave, particularly
Hmm.
Gary 7, who has his agent ticket number, what was it, 194 or something? And
You remember the numbers. I
yeah,
don't.
and he, so what his mission is exactly is not made very clear. He must disrupt the rocket, but at the same time, that rocket was destined to fail because of his interference. That it was a little jerky with the plot lines over there, and yeah, the computer did a good job. I like the computer.
Hmm.
And overall, it seemed a little all over the place, and I feel that this episode was more like a fan fiction of Star Trek than Star Trek proper. It's just my
Hmm.
feeling, just playing in somebody else's sandbox. What did you think, Bala?
Yeah, I agree with that analysis that it felt like Star Trek, the entire canvas, the whole infrastructure that they had built for 2 seasons. With the season finale, they just felt the need to either spin it off into another series or just dovetail and make it seem like a Star Trek episode. But clearly, it was a a shadow of what the original series was all about, the spirit of the original
Yeah.
series. So to me, it felt like, oh, let's what will be cool, add the Star Trek canvas to the whole thing. So more like a fanboy or a fangirl jumping with joy when they see, oh, let's take this story and add the whole character landscape of Star Trek to this whole thing. To me, it felt like that. And when I read Memory Alpha, we are not too far off because apparently Roddenberry wanted to launch a pilot, but said, why should I spend money or get funding for launching a pilot? Might as well do it along with this show. How do I justify it being in this show? Let's add Star Trek to it. So we're not too far.
It looks different because it is different.
No wonder the last act you see Spock and Kirk saying, let's watch Roberta and Gary Seven have their adventures. And there's that funny little cat which can turn into a woman and back into cat form. Maybe it's a shapeshifter. And there's also this invisible alien that nobody knows about. Maybe that will be an element of mystery. Watch it in the next season. It was a campaign for another show, which never happened though.
Yeah, it never it felt so different from the rest of Star Trek. I was actually very puzzled. The dialogue seemed so different, the characterization seemed so different, and for a moment I actually wondered if I was watching Star Trek or something else because it just
Right.
seemed so out there.
Yeah.
And the fact that the Enterprise right at the start is in 1968 was itself so jarring because that's
Yep.
not something that they do. They usually stick to the present. They try to and analyze these alien races or explore uncharted worlds. This is the first time that you get a very vague explanation saying historical research. So let's just go back in time.
Yeah. Yeah, that was funny that they just swept the whole thing under the rug and said, oh,
Yep.
this is historical research. I mean, the first time this happened, right? This is what tomorrow is yesterday. So
Yep.
there it was totally by chance that they were
Correct.
there and they were in trouble. The ship was in trouble. They had to do this. Here, there were two tricky decisions that Kirk had to make.
Yes.
I can see so many elements of the previous episode. One is tomorrow is yesterday, and then
Yeah.
there was the city on the edge of forever,
Ah.
where a decision now, that is the past, can have repercussions over the flow of time. So they're bringing glimpses of all of those episodes and just turning those ideas into one big concoction. No wonder it felt like fan fiction because
Yeah.
fans do that. Fans do take
Yeah.
old ideas and try to mishmash into something that feels like Star Trek.
Correct.
But professional writers don't do that.
Yeah, I was thinking of tomorrow's yesterday, and it's so bizarre that after all the trouble they went through in that episode to escape the past, first of all, time travel shouldn't have been possible according to whatever we saw in that episode. And they went through so much trouble to get back to their future using the sun's orbit as a slingshot. And right at the start, you find them back in 1968, just like that. It really broke the suspension of disbelief for me because I couldn't wrap my head around this that they're suddenly back in the past all by themselves just for historical research. This,
Yeah. And this hiding a planet away and then not finding it also seemed on shaky grounds for me.
they could find the Metrons and all of those advanced races, but they can't find this. What's its name? How can it be? It's just so bizarre. It was surreal actually watching this.
Yes. And they had the best of intentions for a teeny tiny planet 1,000 light years away. So that the same thing that happened to Omicron 6, they say, shouldn't happen here. So that's
How
another.
kind. Why don't they mind their own business? I don't understand them.
So the plot line is that if Gary 7 didn't go on his mission, the US would launch something that would trigger World War III. That's the premise.
Premise, yeah.
He is here to stop all of that and make sure that everybody's so scared that something went off at 100 miles above the earth
Uh-huh. Correct.
and that should somehow make them sign peace treaties. Is that
I also wonder if we hadn't had Kirk's interference, when would Gary Seven have interfered with the rocket exactly? It seemed like he was tampering with it so much that it was actively coming down. at high speed. I was a bit confused at that point because you had the computer having these readouts telling him where the rocket was and how quickly it's descending. And Gary 7 wasn't exactly too proactive at that point. Then Kirk appears and suddenly they detonate the rocket. So it seemed a bit of a mishmash of ideas. Would he have stopped this rocket if Kirk hadn't come on time? It just didn't make that much sense to me. I don't know what he was trying to do exactly. One point I actually thought he's attempting to obliterate some countries on Earth and trigger a war so that later they'll have peace, because it seemed like that with the rocket coming down. And then I found that he was trying to stop it.
Intervene, they would have launched it in as an orbital
Correct.
bomb,
Oh yeah,
suborbital
that's what he said.
missile. So they would have H bombs, they would have
Yeah.
nuclear bombs suborbital, so that they can be launched at any time they want, anywhere they want. So
Yeah, correct.
threat would loom large over anyone, and these superpowers would have their way.
Yeah,
But
and then there would be
this
war.
of something going totally out of whack and exploding harmlessly suddenly wakes them out of this arms race, and they go back and say sign treaties saying they won't have this.
It's not very convincing, and it also shows humanity in a very bad light. And also, I think Kirk had his doubts at all the wrong times in this episode, because you have him speculating on very bizarre things in the beginning. When Gary 7 appears in the transporter room, he's wondering whether he's an alien. Is he telling the truth? Is he not telling the truth? Maybe he's taken a human body, and all those speculative things that he does over there. Finally, when this guy is attempting to stop the rocket from falling into Earth and destroying an entire landmass, Kirk again has a crisis. It seemed a bit out of character for me because he's usually so quick to make his decisions. But when you have less than a minute left and Spock is bumbling at the computer, something about that scene bugged me, because this computer, it talks. I haven't seen it talks quite well. Why is Spock kind of fumbling with the buttons that he knows nothing about? Why doesn't he just talk to it? I don't understand.
Yeah, that's a good one. But I don't think Spock knew that he had ever seen this. I think you could ask that same question about why is Gary 7 using the controls when he can just
Correct.
talk to it and be done with it.
Snobbish. They're just, no wonder she's a beta 5 snob. I found Spock's audacity there quite interesting, because he had no idea what he was getting into with that computer, but he decides to just punch a few things here and there anyway, which is thoroughly illogical. So, yeah, there are a lot of inconsistencies. That's why I felt that it was more like fan fiction than actual Star Trek.
Right off the bat in the teaser, they're building stuff on this 1,000 light years and showing this. I think this is the first time we're seeing any race use 1,000 light years for. I think it was the games of the Triskelion. They do this, right? They show yank them off so many light years away, and it says impossible. But I don't think it was thousands. This is even beyond that. So I started wondering what's going on. Why are they giving us these incredible numbers? Why would somebody be interested thousands of light years away in some other history?
And Spock does a scan of that area 1,000 light years away, which technically shouldn't be too much for the Enterprise.
Oh
But he says
yeah.
there's nothing there, and then they say the planet is hidden and we're just supposed to accept that. How do you hide an entire planet? If you can detect people like the Metrons, and what is the name of that other race which we had where we saw the Klingons for the first time?
Klingons for the first time.
Yeah, that was oh my goodness.
Oregon. No, I'm saying Organians.
Organians, yes. They could detect so many things about the Organians. One of the most advanced races in the galaxy, and the Enterprise was able to detect a lot of things about them. Now they can't detect this little race that's 1,000 light years away. There were so many inconsistencies. I was really disturbed by all of that. Yeah. But the cat was a saving grace.
Yes, I liked his pen. The pen did wonderful things. It could do everything possible. What did he call it? Servo, I think. Servo.
Yeah, I think he called it
Uh,
the servo. That did some very interesting things. I liked the way that it knocked people out grinning. So,
that's a security outside of the brig. Then there were a couple of transport technicians who were just grinning and lying on the floor. And then there was that Sarge in McKinley base as well.
yep,
He
they
was
were
knocked out like that.
grinning. And
So apparently it can be used. And those little dangling things came out of that.
something shiny, at
Yeah.
least, that will distract people and turn them into grinning idiots. Did we get an explanation as to why the Vulcan nerve pinch didn't work on this guy?
Alpha just says he's the third person who cannot fall with the nerve pitch. Khan is the second guy. The first guy is Vians or something like that. The species from the cage.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, one of them. That fellow also doesn't is impervious to this pinch. So there are only
Right.
three people who are
The androids.
escape. Yeah, the androids. Is there a meaning to
Yeah.
this or something like that? They ask in that, right? Yeah, androids also they don't fall under that.
At least some of the previous characters had reasons for being immune to the nerve pinch. This made no sense because we are ultimately told that he's still human. So I would assume that he still has all those nerves that Spock can use for his nerve pinch. It made no sense that he didn't fall to it. But at the same time, when Roberta picks up something and hits him over the head, he falls over. That's
It was just a box, and that happened.
if he's immune, he can fight off 2, 3 people at a time. Spock cannot bring him down with the nerve pinch, but then he's on his knees when she hits him over the head with a box. That's
No, in
anticlimactic.
fact, if she had used her knuckles also, that would have worked even.
I think so.
See, that could have worked very well to show that Roberta is. Okay.
Yeah,
So let
I'm
me.
recording again.
Yeah, let me do that.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, saying that Roberta, if she had just knocked off Gary Seven with her knuckles, that would have added to her. I mean, she's
Oh,
smart
yeah.
and she's strong, right? So it
Yeah.
would have been a great spin-off.
Absolutely. One thing that I would have loved to see is maybe Roberta interact with that computer. There would have been a lot of funny moments with that because the computer
Yeah.
has a personality of being snobbish, it is impatient, and I would have liked to see how she interacts with someone as feisty as Roberta. It would have been so interesting.
Yeah,
But
Roberto calling the computer some names, some
yeah.
interesting names, and then the computer responding back and saying, "Oh, you mind your own business. I know what to do," and all that. And she's like, "Oh yeah, what about this?" And she rattles off. Be a very healthy exchange.
It would have been a very healthy exchange, but it would have been quite funny. Instead, what we have is Roberta being jealous of a cat, which made no sense.
I don't know what's up with that. Suddenly the cat transforming into this lady, and then that episode, right? There's this black. What is that episode called? There's that Halloween in Space
Yes.
Metamorphosis. Man,
Um,
it's completely missing my.
See, some episodes are so memorable we can't remember the titles. It's
Yeah, that one in which she turns into a cat and then back into a lady, and she is also wearing black sequins
Catspaw?
and sparkly.
Yeah.
Cat's paw, yes, cat's
Yes.
paw. That's
That's
the one.
cat. Yeah.
Yes. So this would have been very interesting to have cat's paw. Maybe we should have had that wizard guy also, the genie guy. We add that. It would be completely annoying.
I didn't get why the cat shape shifted or whether Roberta is seeing things, in which case she needs to get herself checked. That's
Yeah. Uh,
it really didn't make sense over there.
Yeah, but speaking of things that don't make sense,
Ah,
there are a lot of footage about this rocket launch. I guess that was an attempt to showcase the space program well
probably,
at the
yes.
time because it felt like the footage was just there. Long sequences of the rocket, of this, we're seeing from every point of view, I mean, you see Scott trying to look for Gary 7, yes, but we're seeing air shots, we're seeing ground shots, ground-based shots, we're seeing all of that. I thought unnecessarily long sequences.
They were too long, the announcements were too long. There's that scene where Scotty aboard the Enterprise is monitoring the rocket launch. It bugged me because you could see the camera going this way in some shots, and then on the other shots, you see it going the other way. What is the Enterprise doing? It seemed so chaotic, and it seemed to be traveling in zigzag. I understand if it released some sort of drone to monitor this rocket launch, but they never said that. They just said that the Enterprise is monitoring it. So I would really like to know why it's going this way in one shot and the other way in the other shot and acting completely drunk. There's something wrong with the Enterprise over there.
I think he mentions it saying that I got some weather satellites to do this.
Did he say
So,
that? It
yeah,
was,
yeah, yeah,
yeah,
he
it was
did, he
pretty,
did.
yeah, thank goodness,
So,
because that really bothered me.
my guess is he's tapped on to many weather satellites
Yeah,
because
probably
you
all
don't
of
get it
them.
from just one camera.
Correct.
And also somehow he has access to all the ground-based cameras as well because we could
Correct.
see ground-based shots as well. So my guess is they've hacked into their CCTV feed or something like that, which you can see.
Yeah.
There's
He's
also a
hacked into
shot
everything
from
just about. Yeah.
you can see a shot from inside the rocket. You can see the second stage go off. You can see all of that. So I don't know if
And
that's benefit for us or is it a benefit for the enterprise to track things. We see lots of these things.
he
I
also
don't
got a
know.
very nice angle of Gary Seven doing his work on the
Oh
rocket,
yeah,
pulling
yeah,
out all
yeah.
the wires and whatever he was doing with the cat. He
Yes,
can't do it with the cat.
that was very interesting. Tomorrow is yesterday kind of a moment happened where the two cops are beamed aboard. They're beamed aboard the Enterprise and then they're ferried back again to the planet. Sorry, to Earth.
Yeah, and tomorrow is yesterday when they got this guy from they did transport a military officer into the
Yeah.
Enterprise by mistake. They didn't send him back immediately. Now in this episode, they get these two security guys aboard the cops aboard
Hmm.
the Enterprise, and then they
Hmm.
explain nothing and just deposit them somewhere else. Isn't that interfering with the timeline? They don't seem to be concerned at all about interfering with the timeline, despite saying that they're concerned. Their
Hmm.
actions didn't really show that.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. I have no idea. Apparently, the pen can do. Speaking of the cop next to the sergeant, the same kind of funny sequence happens. He does that pen thing, like the Men in Black thing, and
yep.
his memory is gone. He basically mesmerizes them or hypnotizes them to believe whatever he has to say, right? Something like that.
Yes,
That's what
yes. He
happens.
tells them to go to sleep and they go to sleep.
Oh, okay, they just listen to that.
But they also have to wake up exactly when Spock and Kirk materialize.
Exact moment,
At the
yes,
exact,
absolutely.
yes, so they can get arrested.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
And this
Kirk?
time, Scotty manages to beam only these two people.
Yeah.
Right, right. I guess they're close to each other, and that's because there are lots of other people also. The beam could actually pick up the others as well, but it doesn't. So the
Yeah.
beam could be directed and pointed at exactly two people around the communicator, something like that.
It seemed to do a lot of things that we haven't seen before in our previous
Hmm.
episodes. It seemed, according to convenience, it could either be many people or one person, and they seem to have some differences in technology because, like you said earlier, Scotty was able to direct them correctly into a room, which he wouldn't have been able to done in many of our previous episodes. So
Hmm.
the Enterprise's scanners did have limits, which made it quite
Hmm.
believable.
Hmm.
Here we find that it can do everything and it can't do anything at all,
Hmm.
which was pretty infuriating given the sequence of
Right.
events.
Right. Next is now we're talking about her fooling around had some consequence. It is they were trying to take her actions and make sure it messed up the attempts by the Enterprise to get Gary Seven back. This is a three-way lock between Scotty, Roberta, and Gary Seven trying to mess up the rocket.
Yeah, and she also has perfect timing, especially when it comes to her patriotism. She's not as surprised as you would expect people to be. She's not too concerned by all the things that she sees. She does scream and call the police and all that, but then she's also remarkably comfortable with all the weird gadgets that she comes across, and she's just sitting there talking to things, hitting people over the head, then flirting, getting jealous of cats.
No, you should know that she has an above average IQ.
Of course,
All this.
yeah, I bow down to superior forces. I don't have that kind of intelligence.
Uh, Also, if Roberta slash Scotty
Yeah,
hadn't yanked out Gary Seven, what is Gary Seven's plan now? Well, now that he has dismantled that, it's going to launch in 30 seconds or so, right?
correct. Yep.
What is his plan? He's going to be vaporized because the portal he has is at least 3 kilometers away from there. 2 to 3 kilometers. The control center has to be a few kilometers from the launch pad.
At least, yeah.
Gary 7 doesn't have the transporter there either. And he doesn't have anybody operating the transporter. He would have been fried. Then
Exactly.
who would then complete the mission? It would go out of whack, yes, but it would not explode at 100 miles because he had to do something on the computer.
Yeah, they seem to be so random when it comes to think like the alien race that is supposedly controlling all this. You would think that they'd have some idea of what he's supposed to do. They might have had some inkling that the two other agents would be killed in a car crash, but everybody is bumbling here, including Roberta, who just goes to the portal door, punches around, turns some knobs, punches some keys, and then the portal is activated just like that and
That's all
yanks,
it takes.
yeah, Gary Seven back from the rocket's controls back into his office. What kind of technology is that? It's very it's very easy to do all that. And I was also kind of disappointed at the end that the computer stopped arguing. I thought it had some. It
Starts
did.
talking sense.
Yeah, it's talking sense and being very flat and robotic. Where was all the personality? I thought she would be at least a little bit annoyed to find Roberta here punching all those buttons and opening all those doors, but nothing. Lot of missed
Hmm.
opportunities. So many
Hmm.
missed opportunities.
Hmm. Yeah. So in the fourth act, we see the famous Roberta knocking out G7. Apparently, there's still another timer now. We had one timer go off, which is the launch
Yes.
sequence, and
Uh-huh.
now we have another timer, which is basically the rocket hitting with the missile. So that's the
Yes.
next thing we see.
Yeah.
Everything just happens exactly on time to pressurize Kirk more than Gary Seven or anyone else, right? Is that the main intention here?
I think so. That whole sequence was quite annoying.
Hmm. Yeah.
And Kirk uses there was, I think, 55 seconds left before detonation, and Kirk decides to have his doubts again. It's so ill timed. And I'm also a little surprised it's Spock there, Bala, because he usually admits when he cannot do something, and here he was just fumbling around and asking
Hmm.
Kirk to make the decision.
Hmm.
So yeah, I'm not very happy with that last part.
Hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
And Spock suddenly hands it over to human intuition. I don't think we have enough data for a logical decision, so I'm going to leave it to human intuition.
That's exactly how he's been up to this point, leaving things to
Human
emotion and
intuition.
human intuition. Seemed a little bit out of character given his absolute mistrust of things that humans do. And he has called human emotions and humans illogical many times. And
Hmm.
suddenly he tells Kirk that he has to take the decision based on his intuition,
Hmm.
and it seemed very unlike him to do that at that point. If he couldn't operate the computer, I think he would have admitted it instead of pressing all those buttons and turning dials. And also wonder why nobody just didn't talk to it, because it was a very
Hmm.
interactive machine up to that point,
Hmm.
until it
Yeah.
wasn't.
Yeah. True, true. So, okay. I think we have ripped apart this episode
Oh,
to
yes,
our
we
heart
have.
content. Parvati,
Yeah.
what did you like and dislike in this section?
Did I? Is a good question.
I did like the fact that Spock and Kirk, our beloved characters, have pretty much nothing to do except mull over decisions and delay things.
Yeah.
Because if
I,
Spock and Kirk hadn't got in the way, that's remained in the 23rd century. I
yeah.
don't think anything major would have happened. It's just
Correct.
a little bit of tussle and hustle, and that's it. But
Yeah.
nothing much would have happened.
Yeah, they would have blown up the whole thing given their absolute lack of sense in this episode. But I think I like the cat. I don't think I liked her turning into a human because that made no sense. I like the cat.
Yes.
She's cute. She actually saved the episode with her cuteness. I like the computer. I like how sassy it was. I like how it backtalks, and then what I didn't like was that towards the end it became just another computer. That was sad. It didn't have to
Yeah.
go that way. I think I liked the general premise of the story, but it didn't come together very well and it didn't feel like Star Trek, which was disappointing. That's my view.
Oh.
What about you?
No, I think yeah. So I'll tell you what I don't like is I already started with Spock and Kirk having nothing to do.
Uh-huh.
I think if you look at the overall objective of the episode,
Yeah.
typical Star Trek commentary would be totally under the surface. It wouldn't be as explicit as it is right here, right? It's in your face.
Yeah.
Arms race, bad. What the superpowers are doing, bad. You
Bad.
can see that, and we have to stop it somehow. It was right there, no subtext, nothing. It was right there in the script itself. So to me, it was not typical Star Trek style. If somebody had
Correct.
watched season 1 and 2, that you need to discuss, analyze, and then you get the real commentary behind it.
Correct.
So to me, it felt totally out of character. This is Adventures of Gary Seven and the Bungling Assistant. Oh, here, by the way, there's Spock, Kirk, Scotty, all that Star Trek. So it is more that. And for me, that is not a Star Trek episode. You have your motives, but maybe he is forced to do that. Gene Roddenberry had to do it, so he is doing that. This whole back and forth between these three storylines really shook. I didn't know what I was watching, right?
Correct.
There was
Yeah.
Gary Seven was messing with stuff. There's Scotty who was trying to do something. And then there's Spock and Kirk who just looking out the window and following action. And then there's Roberta who's meddling and messing with things. So to me, all this at the same time, although it leads to tense moments, it was
Yeah.
actually boring the heck out of me. As a fan, I was let down at that point.
It's also something that I noticed that the humor here in this episode was completely different from the previous
Yes.
episodes.
It
It
wasn't
seemed
funny
like
at all. Yeah.
yeah, it wasn't funny at all. And I actually thought at one point that this whole Gary 7 and Agent
4 and 360
and
yeah.
1 million 10 and all that, it seemed it seemed very much like a parody of something. They were a
Right.
satire or a parody, or they're making fun or something, and it didn't feel serious. With Star Trek is pretty serious, even if it has a lot of humor or it
Yes.
is approaching things with humor. If some of the episodes do that, like
Right.
with Harry Mudd and all of those characters,
Right.
this seemed completely out of it. It seemed different. The humor was different. It seemed like it was mocking something at the same time, and also, like you said, it was too blatantly obvious. This is bad, this is bad, and this is bad, and you will
Right.
also think so. So yeah,
Yeah.
that is not, yeah, it just completely, it didn't feel like something you could relate to after watching so many episodes of Star Trek.
Correct. And to me, it was a knockoff of Tomorrow is Yesterday
Correct.
with other episodes thrown in. They themselves doing a knockoff is okay, but it seemed like a very low grade knockoff in my opinion.
Yes, a very low grade knockoff, and it also felt like they were making fun of everything else and then some.
Okay. All right. That brings us to the last hypothetical question. If the
Yes.
screenwriter were to appear in our episode, what would we ask them?
I think I would ask them to please make this a little more serious and more in line with Star Trek. Maybe not make it appear like amateur writing with the agent code names, with mysterious aliens that nobody knows about, and kindly don't retcon what came before this, because that's what they have been doing. I'd also like to know how the Enterprise decided to go back to 1968, and what is this historical research, given how much trouble they went to get out of the 1960s in the previous episodes. Why are they back there just like that? So there are a lot of questions that need to be answered, and things that have to be clarified, preferably a rewrite of the whole thing. What about you, Bala?
Yeah, I had the same question is why is the Enterprise there?
Yeah.
You can't just sweep it saying historical research
Yeah.
because you could have gone to any era more important than
Yeah.
the one in question. According to another episode, there was a World War III. They could have gone to that moment and prevented, or not
Yeah.
prevent, you can't interfere. So
Hmm.
try to find out why was there a third World War, right? So if this was
Yes.
not the third World War, it was prevented. So why would you go and investigate something that's so important? Why can't
Yeah.
it be something else? To me, that didn't make sense why the
Ah.
Enterprise was investigating this, even for historical research. Why this particular moment? So why not something else? So
Yeah.
it was a failed missile. So why would you go and look at a failed missile?
You want to make it succeed and then rewrite the whole thing, or is there something else?
Thank you so much, Parvati.
Thank
And
you.
if there are any future episodes, we'll think about it. But this is the end of season 2 for us,
Yes, a long journey.
season finale.
Yes.
All
Yes.
right. Take care. Bye, everyone.
Bye, Bala. See you soon.
That brings us to the end of this episode. Thank you for listening to the podcast Enterprise. Please do share your reviews with us, and please share this podcast with any of your writing friends or trickies. Live long and prosper.